Hello viewers, welcome back to the channel. This time around, it's Shaka Anwar, your math tutor. But today, we're going to talk about money supply as part of monetary economics. As I told you that this time around, we're going to be more diverse. We're going to be talking about mathematics as well as economics. Now today, we'll talk about the money supply and particularly the money supply function. As you see, we'll talk about the money supply function, but remember members, money has a lot of definitions, which are a few of them. But first of all, let us first talk about money as defining it as the total of the currency held at the bank and then the cash deposits. Like money has three definitions. But today, shall first define money as cash held at bank plus the cash held at bank plus the deposits, checkable deposits. I'm saying we define money M1. Our first definition of money is going to be called M1. M1 refers to currency held by non-banking republic. We say our money M1 is defined by currency held by non-banking republic and checkable deposits. This means that we define money M to be we let our M1 be equal to M. Now from there, we shall just need to now say that our M now equals to C, which is cash held by non-banking republic plus checkable deposits, which is D, like that. M equals C plus D. That's our equation 1. That's beginning from there. We call it equation 1. Now from there, we know that if we divide currency divided by D, but we say we shall say that if I have C over D, okay, if I divide everywhere by, if I have M divided by D equals to C over D plus D over D, so I'm going to have equation that M over D equals to C over D plus 1. But C over D is called currency deposit ratio, is currency deposit ratio. And we shall name it as CR. Yes. Now, where there is C over D, if we put there CR, it means that our M over D is going to be the same as having CR plus 1. Therefore, our M in terms of the deposit is going to be M equals to CR plus 1 times D. And that's going to be our equation 2. Now, I think we are clear on that point. But now I want to take you through the meaning of these terms we are having. Equation 2. Now from here, we get to know that we said M is our money, which is defined by currency held by cash. Like we're talking about currency people have as cash. How much amount of money do you have as cash, and then how much amount of money do you have in bank as your deposits. This is the M. Now C over this called currency deposit ratio. This is the ratio we see how much money people have in cash with respect to what they keep in bank. That is C over D, currency deposit ratio. Now D over D is just 1, and then M over D equals CR plus 1, and therefore if we bring this side, you'll have M equals CR plus 1 times D. And that is our money definition in terms of the deposits and the currency deposit ratio. Now from there, we're going to do another term called the high-powered money. We have now high-powered money. High-powered money, we call it H. High-powered money for it is defined as the sum of currency and total bank reserves. We define it as sum of currency and total bank reserves. R. So you can call it R, you can call it TR. Total bank reserves, TR. In that way. Therefore, our high-powered money, H equals to C plus TR. In that way. If we are going to divide through by D everywhere, we shall have H over D equals C over D plus TR over D. But now here we are saying that now we say C over D, but C over D, it is our CR, meaning currency deposit ratio. And then likewise, it is now TR over D. Shall call it TR over D, let's call it RD, meaning reserve deposit ratio. The reserve deposit ratio. Like from here now, we are saying that you said C over D is CRI is the currency deposit ratio. Think about how much amount of money people have in cash with respect to what they keep in bank. Now TR means reserve deposit ratio. It means that how much reserves do banks have as respect to what customers deposit as deposits in the bank. That's what we're talking about. Now from here, shall have our H over D equals now CR plus RD, something like that. And then also if we have our high powered money demand, H is in terms of CR plus RD times the deposit. And then this is the difference of the high powered demand in terms of the deposits, because you say money depends on how many deposits does commercial bank have, because if they're not depositing in commercial banks, therefore commercial banks are not able to create money. To create money, commercial banks create money supply as a result of the deposit. That's why we make M in terms of D and then H in terms of D. Then this is our equation 3. Now from equation 2 and 3, we can divide them. If I divide equation 2 and 3, I'll be able to have the definition of money right now. Now, from that step, I think if we divide, I think I have to create space for the work. I have to create space, yes. If I create space for this work, remember, we are not now M1, equation 2 and equation 3 is what we need. Now, if I do like this, I have space. We have to say that now, from there, we just need to say that if I divide 2 by 3, I'll have M equals CR plus 1 into D. Now divide by 3, 3 is H, equals to H out of now CR plus RD into D. And therefore I'll have my equation as M over H equals to CR plus 1 out of CR plus RD, where this D and this D cancels. And that's my equation. But members, remember, total deposits, total reserves, but we know that total reserves are divided into 2. TR is divided into 2. TR equals to the reserve requirement, or the reserve ratio, plus the excess reserves. Remember, let us go through here. This is the reserve requirement. Then this is the total reserves. Total reserves, yes. Now let us just go through a simple recap of total reserves and the reserve requirement. Remember, if a customer or a depositor makes a deposit in the commercial bank, there is a certain percentage of money that commercial bank has to keep with the central bank by law. That's what we call the reserve requirement. Let us take an example. If someone deposits 1 million in a commercial bank, in a bank, and the reserve rate, say the reserve rate or the reserve ratio is 20%. Therefore, that commercial bank, says Centenary, has to keep 20% of this 1 million as the reserve requirement with the central bank. Therefore, out of this 1 million, the 200K will be kept with the central bank as the reserve requirement. Yes. And therefore, the bank will be left with what? The bank is supposed to be left with 800 K for borrowing and doing its activities, the customers. Therefore, this is the reserve requirement. Now, what is now the excess ratio? Excess reserves. Now, excess reserves, these are reserves over and above the reserve requirement that commercial banks keeps with the central bank. I think we're together. I'm saying the excess reserves, these are reserves over and above the required reserves commercial banks keep with the central bank. An example, if a central bank is required, if the commercial bank is required to keep 200k with it as the reserve requirement. Now, if the bank keeps instead of keeping 200k, and it keeps now 300k, the difference over 100k becomes the excess reserves because it is excess of what is required. Excess of the required reserves is kept with the central bank. Are we together? Or another definition of the excess reserves, this refers to the excess amount of money over and above the reserve requirement that commercial bank have to keep with the central bank, or keeps with the central bank, or the bank keeps just and that does not use it for lending out to the public. That's what I call the excess reserves. I think members I'm clear on that point. We just need to know the meaning of the reserve requirement and the excess reserves. Excess reserves, we say the reserve requirement, this is the amount of money, part of the customer's deposit that has to be kept with the commercial bank by law. Then the total reserve, the excess reserves. So this is the excess reserves, not the total reserves. Excess reserves. Now the excess reserves, we say that this is the amount of money over and above the reserve requirement that commercial banks keeps with the central bank. That's what we call the excess reserves. I said if the commercial bank has to keep 200k with the central bank and then it keeps 300k, therefore there's a difference over 100k. This 100k becomes the excess reserves. Yes, members, I think we're on that point. Now, from that definition, we can easily now go ahead and see how we can now derive our money supply function, and we see the money multiplier. Yes, the money multiplier. Now, from there, we get to know that our TR equals RR, meaning the reserve requirement plus excess reserves. Now, if we divide by D, and we divide by D everywhere, and divide by D here, shall have TR over D, say this is our RD. Therefore, our RD will be our RD, yes, is the RD is what will be now the same as having the reserve requirement deposit ratio, R plus the excess reserve deposit ratio, which are going to call, I want to call it now, it's going to be a function. It's going to be E, a function of the lending rate minus the reserve rate. Yes, now let me explain on this part of the lending rate and the reserve rate. Yes, I'm now on this part of explaining this equation here. Just explain this part here. We are saying the amount of like this extra 100k will only depend on the lending rate and the reserve rate. In which way? In a way that just this is a function of R. It is the, we said R is the lending rate, and then R naught is the reserve rate. Now let us explain this point here. Now our ER, excess reserves, depends on the lending rate and the excess and the reserve rate, in a way that members, in order for me to keep the extra amount of money with the commercial bank, it means I have a lot of money with me. Now, if the lending rate is high, what will happen to our excess reserves? Yes, if the lending rate is high, what will happen to our excess reserves? Remember, the lending rate is high means a commercial bank is making a lot of profits by lending out the money. Therefore, it will make a loss by it keeping the money with the central bank, because this extra 1k could bring in a lot of profits than it keeping it with the central bank. Therefore, the lending rate and the excess reserves, if the lending rate is high, excess reserves will be low, because commercial banks won't keep extra amount of money with the central bank, but it would rather lend it out to the public so as to earn more profits. Likewise, if the reserve rate if the reserve rate is low, what does it mean? The reserve rate is low. It means that the central bank has to keep less amount of money with the central bank by law. Therefore, it is left with a lot of money to lend out to the public. Therefore, if there's a lot of money to lend to the public, therefore it will be able for it to now give out the excess reserves to the central bank to keep there. Is it making sense? Yes, I think it's making sense. I'm saying this is the reserve rate. The lower the reserve rate is low. It means that the commercial banks have to keep less amount of money with the central bank. Yes, this leaves it with a lot of money going to the public. Therefore, if it wants to keep a certain part of that money left with the central bank, which are the excess reserves, it will have a lot of money to keep with the central bank, which are excess reserves. Therefore, these excess reserves will depend mainly on the lending rate and the reserve rate. And we want to take a scenario here that we want to just give out this takeaway point that I want to say that if the interest rate is high, yes, I'm saying if the interest rate is high, and relative to the reserve rate, the opportunity cost for the banks to hold excess reserves is high. What's the meaning of that statement? That's what he's saying, that if the interest rate is high, if this running rate is high, relative to the reserve rate, this reserve rate, the opportunity cost for banks to hold excess reserves is high. It means what? It means that let us go step by step. If the lending rate is high, if the interest rate is high on lending, it means that the bank is making more profits by lending out money to the public. Relative to the reserve rate, the reserve rate is the rate at which commercial banks have to keep the money with the central bank. If the reserve rate is low, therefore the commercial bank it has a lot of money to lend to the public because it's keeping less money with the central bank. Yes. Now that's saying the opportunity cost for banks to hold excess reserves is high. Like what the commercial banks lose out by keeping extra amount of money with the central bank is high, in a way that that amount of money they would have kept in the central bank will earn less interest because the reserve rate is low, as compared when these commercial banks lend out to the public because the lending rate is high. Therefore, they will be losing a lot by keeping excess reserves, by holding excess reserves with them. I think it's making sense, this statement, but that's not the statement is very crucial in our discussion. Now, members, if we go back to our equations now, I just need to have something like, if I put off this statement here, I have now something like, yes. Now, if we put it back into our equation here, we have here, this equation here, we shall say our M over H. M we said is the money supply. This is the money definition. H is high powered money. Then CR is currency deposit ratio plus CR. Now we shall have now CR plus RD. Now RD is going to be RR plus E in terms of R minus R naught, where E is the function, where E is the function is just the function of R naught, the lending rate, minus the reserve rate. And therefore our M equals to CR plus 1 out of the CR plus RR plus E into R minus R naught. Everything times H, which is the high power demand. And therefore, this is the formula for money supply function. And from here, we get into that this, our multiplier now is going to be CR, money multiplier, it is CR plus 1 out of CR plus RRR plus E in terms of R minus R naught, where we get to know that CR is the currency deposit ratio, RR is the reserve requirement deposit ratio, and then E into R minus R naught is the excess reserve deposit ratio. Now from there, we have got the formula. This is the money multiplier, and then this is the definition of the money. Now this is the money supply function, where money is a function of high powered money. Now members, before you go any further, let us now try to see how we can relate the following. Now for us to relate the following now, how can we relate interest rate with money? How with money supply? How does money supply relate with the currency deposit ratio? How does money supply relate with the reserve ratio? How does money supply relate with the high powered money demand? Like how do they change? We're going to interpret the effects of the coefficients of the money supply curve. Now members, let us talk about now the interest rate. What's the interest rate? I'm saying the interest rate is the interest rate on lending. We say an increase in the interest rate implies that bank loans, the bank loan exceeds reserves. When these loans are deposited, additional checkable allowance are created. Thus, increase in ARA increases money supply. What are we saying? If interest rates on money increases, money supply has to increase in a way that yes, money supply is going to increase because banks will want to lend out the money to the public so as to make more profits. Therefore, they will be lending more. They will be lending more to the public, hence creating money supply. I'm saying if interest rate increases on lending, if this increases on lending, the effect that you have on money supply is that increase in will increase money supply because these commercial banks will be making a lot of profits by them lending out the money to the public, hence making a lot of profits. Therefore, increase in increases M. M and R is the interest rate on lending, have a positive direction. Increase, if they both increase, have a positive relationship. If M increases also, if R increases, also increases M, because if R increases, it means that it is more profitable for a commercial bank to lend out money to the public because it's going to be making profits. Therefore, it's going to lend more money to the public so as to make more profits. Likewise, now let us talk about now to the reserve rate. The reserve rate is this amount. Reserve rate, yes. Reserve rate, you say the reserve rate refers to the amount of money a commercial bank has to keep as part of the customers' deposits with the central bank. The reserve rate. Like if I bring in my 1M, the reserve rate is 20k. This 100k has to be kept with the central bank. Now, if the reserve rate is low, what happens? If the reserve rate is low, it means that the central bank, the commercial bank will be left with a lot of money. Will be left with a lot of money, which is 800k, for it to lend out to the public. Therefore, the reserve rate and the money supply has an inverse relationship because I'm seeing also it is just here down. Now, therefore, the money supply and the reserve rate have an inverse relationship or negative relationship. An increase in the reserve rate will lead to a reduction in money supply because commercial banks will have less money available for them for lending to the public. Likewise, a reduction in the reserve rate will increase money supply because commercial banks are left with a lot of money to lend to the public. Now, let's talk about now high powered demand H. M and H. Money M is money supply and then H is high powered money. I'm seeing M and H have a positive relationship. As M increases, high powered money has to increase, and as H increases, M has to increase. They both have a positive relationship. Now, lastly, let's talk about the required reserve ratio. We've said about it. Required reserve ratio, we've said about it, and then currency deposit ratio. Currency deposit ratio is our CR. I'm saying CR. So the CR is the same as having currency over deposit. This currency, it means that if the CR increases, it means that the numerator is bigger than the denominator. It means that people have a lot of cash with them and they have less money as deposits. The deposits are low. If this is increasing, are we together? The currency deposit ratio means that currency over deposit, the CR. Now, if the currency deposit ratio is high, it means that people have a lot of money in cash and then they have less as deposits. Therefore, if there are less deposits with commercial banks want to be able to have more money to lend to the public. Therefore, an increase in CR leads to leads to a reduction in the money supply because people have a lot of money as cash and commercial banks have less deposits. Therefore, they want to be able to create more money supply. I think we are fine there. And then lastly, let us talk about it. I think everything is fine. With that, I think everything is fine. Remember, I think we have tried to explain the money supply function, and then you have seen the relationship between everything. Remember, try to enjoy this, and for more questions, just feel free to hit my comment section. I'll be able to answer. As I say that we are going to be diverse, shall be having some maths, some economics, because you have to be diverse, and some statistics. This is the money supply function, as you've seen. The Shaka Annual Math Tutor. Don't forget, subscribe, like, share, and comment. Share the videos to your colleagues also doing arts in econ education and the Bachelor of Science in Education, because this is monetary economics and it is very essential to our economy. I said my number is 0700 98 14 68. Feel free to inbox me. I'll be able to reply to your questions. People who want private coaching, Shaka Annual is always available. And I think with this, let's call it a day. And I wish you a nice day and a nice time. Thank you for watching. My name is Shaka Annual, your math tutor. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share for more videos like this.